Design is, I think it is about everything that you experience. It can be spaces, it can be products, it could be communication that you have with another person. So, even writing an email, somebody has designed that format, somebody has designed the way it will be communicated through your email address. So, I think design is there in every element. It's just that we can't see it at times, it's invisible, we don't realize it, but then somebody has made that effort to design it that way. So to put it simply, it's in everyday things.
Design is about creation, but it's kind of man-made creation. And for me, design is often responding to I'll say problem, but it's responding to a need, looking to address something. And it's often looking to find a good solution to a problem.
Design, I guess, is deciding how things look and feel, how they fit in, how people use them.
A definition that's really stuck with me, actually, it comes from my time in Dundee. The V&A Dundee had opened, I think, 6 months ago, so I was loving it. And they organised for Alice Rossborn to come and do a talk on her new book. I think it was Design as an Attitude. She said, design is a useful tool for creative people in challenging circumstances. And that kind of like really stuck with me, viewing design as this tool that anyone can use to approach a situation.
Accessibility.
Accessibility from a technical point of view means how people move around in buildings, and there's lots of definitions in the building regulations, which are the technical standards that we need to meet before a building is signed off and you're allowed to use it.
Signed off.
So when a building is signed off, then that means that it's completed and it meets the technical regulations. Also can relate to when an architect says it's completed as well. There's lots of different people involved in the process of building a building. So in terms of accessibility, to me as an architect, I think the term is broader, and it also relates not only to the basic things that are in building regulations, but also considers audio. It considers, for example, definition of colours in buildings. So if your sight is poor, then it makes it easier to move around a building, and so on. So there's a lot involved in it, and that might be specific to different clients, or it might be that we need to be considering that on a wider basis. And again, that will depend on the building type. So a building like this in the V&A, you'll be thinking about a lot of these things more than you might want to if you're doing an extension for. But it's a very interesting topic that's usually wide-ranging.
Active travel.
Active travel is, providing a means for people to get around, where they do it by the energy of their own body. So that could be cycling, walking, wheeling. I guess active travel here in Scotland is most often used for cycling infrastructure and providing cycle tracks or segregated cycle lanes. But it is really about saying we have a lot of people using cars, and there are a lot of examples of cities designed very much for people using cars. And if we take a step back and consider we don't want to remove the cars, they're still quite often necessary, but how can we also provide opportunities for people who choose to get around by active travel, by the energy of their own body.
Aspect.
Did you say aspect? So aspect, there's loads of different terms for aspect. Like what are you getting at with this aspect? Aspect, in this particular aspect, I'm thinking about the way that a building is orientated. So if it's south-facing, that's a south-facing aspect. North-facing aspect.
Authenticity.
Authenticity is about, well, for me, that is about being authentic to, it's just about being real and true.
Bleed.
Bleed, another print term. So where you might want to print to the very edge of a page, what you would do is extend the design past the page size. You would add a few millimetres all around, and then when it was printed and then it was cut, it could be cut inside the bleed. So, yeah.
Brand storytelling.
Brand storytelling. Brand storytelling is part of your brand identity. So you are building up why someone, so for me, Iceland Heroes, we're an e-commerce store. So why is someone shopping with us? What is the story behind our brand? What is our brand morals, our values? What are we trying to chat to a customer about? So yeah, kind of like your journey as a brand and making sure that that's relevant and that customers can see that the whole time when they're shopping with you.
CAD.
CAD. So CAD is the drawing tool that we use, and there's all sorts of different computer programs which are called CAD. And some of them are two-dimensional, some of them are three-dimensional, but it's a whole rabbit hole that you can go down.
Carrot.
Carat, as in jewellery and metal. It refers to the parts of gold. So in gold there are 24 carats. So 24 carat gold is full gold, just gold. 18 carat gold has got 18 parts out of 24, and the rest is copper and silver and things to make it more usable, to make it, 24 carat gold is very soft. You can't really do anything with it except push it into something.
Couture.
Couture is an element of design that is, so a couture garment would be something that was made in like an atelier, so it's like hand...
Atelier.
That is like a design studio, but it's people who are trained in a specific part of the garment. So say you're thinking of like a Givenchy dress that's all covered in feathers. There'd be one person that's just doing the embroidery and the feathering. Well, when I say one person, maybe a team of people that are trained on that. So the big design houses like Chanel, Givenchy, these people have couture houses and ateliers, and it's only to a very small demographic of customer. So someone who can afford to spend like a year's mortgage on a garment, basically.
Dwang.
What is a dwang? A dwang is a Scottish term, and it's a piece of timber in a wall that goes horizontally. What's nice about the word dwang is it's regional. So in England it's known as a noggin, which has a different meaning up here in Scotland.
Ergonomic.
Ergonomics, yes. I've designed a few furniture pieces before, and I've realized that ergonomics, because it has to do with the human body, it plays a major role. So ergonomics is anything that is interacting with the human body, and it's a physical aspect of the human proportions, which is used in furniture design or making a seat or what should be a table height kind of thing.
Greenfield and brownfield.
Well, greenfield is just urban development on land where there was effectively green fields before. So kind of undeveloped areas, which in some ways gives you this clean slate to draw on. As someone with a preference for the urban, will quite often also mean that all of the infrastructure that you need to create a city isn't out there. So greenfield planning is kind of putting out something that will often be suburban and providing it with the roads and all the technical infrastructure, but also the social infrastructure, the schools, and whatever is needed to actually create a small and functional settlement. Brownfield is development in, changing areas that have been developed into something else. Most often it refers to industrial areas that were polluted and less brown, and turning them into, modern developments and changing that into something more urban, so with more people and more diverse activities than industrial sites.
Gutters.
Gutters. So gutters is another typography term. If you have columns of text, the space between those columns is known as a gutter. And again, they can be wider, narrower, depending.
Hallmark.
Hallmark is the oldest form of customer protection. It's quite UK specific, as in we've got a UK hallmark. Different parts of the world have different things going on, and it's a stamp on the metal to so the customer knows what metal type it is, where it was stamped, the year it was stamped, and the person that made it. So it's got all that information in the stamp. And so every piece of jewellery goes to an assay office. In Scotland, it's usually Edinburgh.
An assay office?
An assay office, yeah, you know, the assay office. Yeah. So there's 4 assay offices in the UK, and they test your metal for its quality that you've put it in as, and stamp it for you.
Hero shot.
A hero shot. A hero shot is the part of your campaign that you are going to be using on like things like maybe your printed marketing. It's the thing that really defines what this collection is about. So for us, the hero shot are those standout items that we know stylists are going to use, that they might get on a celebrity client, but we might not necessarily sell loads of them, but it's the thing that defines the brand.
Icon.
Icon. It's a visual design which instantly tells you what it is about. You know, conveys the idea.
Inclusive design.
Inclusive design. So we really think about inclusive design in the sense of how do you sort of disrupt traditional design processes to make it really clear that you are doing design in service of others and that you really have to include them from the get-go in any design process, or else you're not sort of creating design with any kind of integrity.
And also the fact that it's not just from the get-go, but it's throughout the entire process. Yeah. Like you're engaging with the folks who are going to be, you know, impacted by that, by the outcome of that design, like through every stage in the process. I would say that design is universal, right? I mean, we design, you know, our outfit, what we're going to wear for any occasion. We design a meal, you know, we put those components together in a certain way. So we tend to think of design as a verb. It's something that you do, and it's something that we all do. That we all design something, you know, like whether it be the arrangement of a room, of our house, you know, of our garden. You know, it's that process of imagining and translating those ideas, those visions into, you know, a more preferable state. And so there isn't really anything that we haven't designed.
I think the key thing for us is the sort of way that humans sort of shape their environments and shape their sort of civil and sort of organizing structures and sort of impose that, right? And so that's in like small everyday radical acts that you might do for yourself, but it also sort of goes all the way up to that sort of level of like how a civilization organizes itself. And so design is at one time about these very tangible things that get made and produced in the world, but it's also about like the intangible like arrangement of like governments and ideas.
I guess design for me, it means it's about how you can improve the world. Thinking about how you make things easier or more visually attractive, or spaces to be more joyful. So it's about improving situations.
You can have 2 coffee shops across the street from one another. They serve the exact same coffee at the exact same price, and service design or the experience design is why you choose to go to one over the other. It's that better experience, that better design and consideration.
I suppose design to me is infused in everything. It's how I think, it's how I look at the world, it's something that I can't help myself from doing. But I also think it's something that you don't have to be a designer to do. It's something that anyone does, whether consciously or not consciously.
Design for me is a way for me to express myself from the way I dress. My business is design-led, different projects I take on, and then even like my home, it's about creating an atmosphere, an environment, and like an extension of yourself through things that you like.
Well, yeah, I see good design as something that doesn't like waste materials, waste processes and time, and something that works well. You know, I'm not appreciative of something that looks really pretty, but like a jug that doesn't pour well. It's got to do both.
Infrastructure.
So infrastructure is, I guess, all the technical bits that makes everything in the city work. Our roads, bridges, electrical cables, sewers, and yeah, that sounds really dry and boring, but of course it's necessary for the city to work. And I think it's also, I guess, what I'm interested in is that a lot of the infrastructure does actually have an impact on our daily life and can be changed by design. So there's a choice between creating a bridge that just functionally works and creating a bridge that actually looks nice. So coming up to Dundee, I crossed the fourth, rail bridge, and you can't see it from the train, but I know if you drive, you see this beautiful bridge, and it creates actually a place. It creates like an identity for where it is, if it is something that people notice. And in the same way, in like at a very small scale, if you create rainwater management infrastructure that instead of being a concrete pipe is a small park with trees and a small play park in it, it's something that has a functional quality but also creates an identity for where it is, and yeah, sparks some joy in daily life.
An Ingo.
And an Ingo does exactly what it says on the tin. It is something which goes in the wall towards the window, otherwise known as a reveal. But it's a great word. I love when things actually just describe exactly what they do.
Innovation.
Innovation is the process of once you have invented something, like how that invention becomes distributed through a wider society. So the process of invention is the creation of something new. The process of innovation is how that new thing becomes more of a mass artifact or process or whatever. It's how that diffuses through society.
Yeah, so it's both about sort of just scaling in the sense of going to a sort of mass distribution model, but it is also about the sort of, again, now replacing in some cases or displacing in some cases a previous innovation or a previous invention. So it has both of those forces. Sometimes it does sit alongside previous innovations. Like we still have vinyl records, even though we also now have the, Spotify and downloadable sort of content platforms. So it sometimes replaces, or displaces, but it almost always sort of disrupts a previous innovation.
Iteration.
Iterations. At times it's good, at times it's bad, especially when you have client deadlines. But it is about improving what you've already done. Improving something, some idea in a better way. Yeah.
Kerning.
Kerning. Yes, so kerning is a typography phrase, and it's all to do with letter spacing. So kerning is to do with the spacing of letters between one another, so either wide, narrow.
Leading.
Leading is kind of kerning's sibling, and this is to do with the space of words and their lines between them. So almost what you might consider to be kind of line spacing. So it's possible to have things really tight or really far apart and inject space into them and let things breathe. It's a great design term.
Line sheet.
Line sheet is a bit of paper with all the things on it that you are giving to a shop. Or if you were marketing yourself to go into put your jewellery or your products into a shop, you would have a sheet with all your prices and all your products on it so that the shop could get a good idea of what you sell.
Lookbook.
Lookbook. A lookbook is just the last part of kind of like the process of designing a garment when you're in the fashion industry. So you'll create a lookbook, which is exactly how you want the garments to look and tells the story of the collection as well. So all of your underlying themes that are in the collection will be through it. So you'll be able to tell if it's a story on like Runaways or if it's based on like Elton John and some big rock and roll thing. You'll get that from the way the pictures are presented in the lookbook. So the buyer understands the whole part of the collection and not just the garment when you're selling to stores.
Lorem ipsum.
I love a bit of lorem ipsum. So it's a filler text that I use whenever we create like a document, a design document. We would kind of create a layout in advance rather than leaving it to the last minute, and we would kind of like arrange where we want the images to be and where we want the text to be. And within that text, it can look a bit jarring to just have it quite empty. So you can put a filler text in it, which is lorem ipsum, which I believe is kind of like Latin mixed with like other language interpretations. Doesn't make any sense, but it's like a fixed language that goes on and on basically as sentences and paragraphs, but is kind of gibberish potentially.
Low-hanging fruit.
Low-hanging fruit, that's the easy things to address. So an example might be putting really good cycle lanes in on a wide road. It's easy to do.
Mandrel.
Mandrel. A mandrel is a long shaft of metal tapered for stretching rings on. So if you want a ring made, you would go to a shop or a jeweler and you would get sized with a big hoop of lots of different rings, and the jeweler would use that ring that you've taken the size of, slip it onto a mandrel, and make your ring around that bit of the mandrel that your ring fits on.
Mood board.
Mood board. Mood board for us is one of the beginning parts of the design process. So you'll create and collect all of your research and inspiration images and try and identify a few key things that are relevant. So we use mood boards in terms of shooting campaigns. So I'll work with a person who's our content creator, and we'll make separate mood boards for that show like kind of an idea of set and theme and the mood that we want to carry through the shoot. So for example, we had a collection called Outlaws that was based on runaways. So we shot loads of places in Scotland that looked like they could have been in LA and tried to location scout and put that on. And then for designing mood boards, I'll look at fabrics that we're going to use, the theme, like maybe who our ideal customer will be, and put that together, and then that'll go to the production team. So they've got that constant idea when they're making the garment of what the end goal is.
Orphan.
Orphan, okay. Orphan is something I always confuse because there's orphans and there's widows. And orphan, I think, is a word at the end of a paragraph left on its own. Poor thing. And a designer would always look where they could to try and bring that orphan up with the rest of its family.
Widow.
Widow. So I think, therefore, widow is words that are over the page. So like orphan, but worse, because you're cast far apart from your family. They're on the other page. You can't even see them anymore. So even more so, a designer would try to do their best to control these things, keep things together where they can.
Participatory design.
Go ahead.
So participatory design is something that came out in the Scandinavia in the 1970s. And what it was that there were some folks there who were looking at what the impact of computing was going to be on jobs. And so they were looking at the threat that automation was going to play in the workforce. And what they did was they went into workplaces, and what they did was they tried to understand the things that people knew because they had done it over and over and over again, and how to respect and almost revere that human knowledge to protect it from being displaced from the workforce. So that process of engaging with the workers in the workplaces became known as participatory design.
Yeah. And I would sort of think about it as like the difference between if inclusive design is the sort of aspiration vision for designing with, then participatory design offers designers a set of methods, which are the kind of how you would actually go about doing that designing with, right? So it really organizes the role of like both research and making and co-creation in ways that designers can sort of really put it into a set of practices.
So placemaking.
Placemaking, well, short or long?
Short.
I would say placemaking is filling in the space with kind of activities or use. So a design can be about making it nice, but placemaking is about also encouraging things to actually happen there, or like shaping becomes kind of theoretical, but shaping the space through use. So again, you can combine it with, if for example you close off a street for traffic, that's one thing, but what can you do through design to also encourage certain activities to happen there? Can you speak with the shops about moving, well, seats out so that people might take their food or coffees on the street, and they might sell even their things outside? And I guess placemaking is that process of after you know, like how the space is set out, also getting people to use it and kind of develop it and make it come to life.
Pantone.
Pantone. Well, before it was a set of merchandise, designer bags and cups, Pantone was, or is rather, a colour matching system. So the amazing thing in some ways about colour is that you can make it out of just a few colours. So on screen, red, green and blue, and on print you've got cyan, magenta, yellow and black. And these can combine in different amounts to create all manner of colours. But the great thing about Pantone is it's pure colour, so it isn't made of a mixture, it's a single colour. So it might be, well, any particular colour, but there are colours you will struggle to make from a blend that can only truly be made by using the pure Pantone colour. And they're given numbers so that people are able to reference them and use them in different ways across different items.
Ideally, if you surround yourself with things that are pleasing, it will bring a level of joy to your life. Like, I'm not going to say that it will be the joy in your life, but I mean I think that's kind of the ground level. Make things that are nice is good.
Everything has been designed for either the functionality or its experience, and that is why it is important, because we as people who are associating with these spaces, these products, these services, we are interacting with them, and that's where the design aspect comes. It helps, it improves the functionality or the experience. So I think that's why it's very important. It is everywhere around us. Yeah.
Something that isn't designed is probably something that doesn't function.
The world in which we find ourselves has been designed and is continuously being designed. Like, somebody somewhere is making decisions about how we are going to do things, right? And the thing is, I mean, sometimes it feels that we are disempowered. And so the thing is, how can we use design? How can we use that design process in order to distribute that decision-making ability and give people more agency over the world that they want to live in?
It's what I enjoy doing. So the fact that I can make a living out of it is extremely important. And so we need to make, design always being promoted within people and make people understand it more so they appreciate it and want to pay a ridiculous amount of money for a kilt pen or a piece of jewellery, but it will last them forever, and they won't regret it.
Prototype.
Prototype is the first time that you're creating that object or that product or that whatever. So you're deciding the material or how to express that idea in a physical sense. So that is the prototype.
Raster.
Yes, raster. So unlike vector, raster has the problem of being difficult to scale. So it's made up effectively of a load of pixels. Pixels are small squares, so 1 by 1. So a screen would be made up of a large number of pixels, and therefore a overall image would be made of pixels, and this rastered image is how you would see it on a screen. But if you wanted to make something that was the size of a postcard to the size of even a magazine spread, it quite quickly struggles and it gets fuzzy and loses its quality.
Render.
A render is a drawing, usually that comes from CAD, and has been developed so that it looks like a photorealistic image.
Responsive design.
Responsive design, much more of a digital term, and this is all about how a design will behave on different devices. So whether that's a desktop, a laptop, computer, or a tablet, or a phone. So for example, how a menu might change to a burger menu, 3 little lines. So a burger menu, often seen as a few lines rather as to signify there's going to be a menu there when you press it on your phone. Whereas on a laptop, you've got space to see the different menu items.
Sample.
Sample. Okay, a sample is like an experiment or a prototype that you'd use to. So it's similar to a prototype, and it's either to show the customer what something might look like, or it's to try something out for yourself as well and check it'll actually work.
Sense making.
Sense making.
So sense making is a process that we think is really important for designers to do, in the sense of making sense of things. So there's all this information, there's all this data, there's all this stuff that we can capture to try and understand any given situation. But the thing is, there's a process of which we have to make sense of that. And so that sense making process is about looking at that and engaging with different people who have different backgrounds, different perspectives, and trying to make sense of that information from a lot of different perspectives, so that we have a robust model, a robust idea of what is actually going on before we go in and mess with things and try and change it. Because if we need to see those downstream consequences, if we need to see those things that we're not seeing, that means we need to be able to make sense of things in a way that accommodates everyone who's going to be impacted by it.
Silhouette.
Silhouette. A silhouette is how a garment sits on a person. So we're a body positive brand, and we think about all different types of body shapes. So some in generic stores, someone would buy a silhouette, maybe they're a pear shape, so they're going to buy a garment that's flattering to them. So we always think about how we can change the silhouette, which is just how your garment looks on a person.
Stakeholder.
So a stakeholder is, one of the people who might have an interest in the project, the residents who live right next to the square that you're redesigning, but also people who might be crossing through it, shop owners next to the square, drivers who might be used to going that way but you want to encourage going somewhere else, or people who might be usually going shopping somewhere else but you want to encourage to come to that space. So it's really thinking about who are current and potential future users and what's their role in the project and how might they be affected by the change.
Sterling.
Sterling is sterling silver, I'm assuming you mean. So this, again, this is a sort of mark of the quality of the silver, how much silver is in the silver. So sterling silver is 925 parts out of 1,000, and the rest of it is other metals to make it into a more workable alloy.
Alloy.
An alloy is a mix of metal. So most metals you see are alloys because they've been mixed with another metal to make them more better for their use.
Stock photo.
A stock photo is a photo that you can pay some money for to use. You don't own it, but you get to use it for a certain amount of time.
Sustainability.
Sustainability, again, is a big term that covers a lot of different things, but to me it's about ensuring that we don't take more than we, if you like, deserve or the world can provide us with, is how it's summed up. But in an architecture world, that relates to looking at water, energy use, material provenance, and reducing carbon inputs as a summary.
Thinking outside of the box.
thinking outside of the box. What a nonsense term. Thinking outside the box, I think, just means think of an idea that's not going to be the first thing that someone else thinks of. So trying to access that other little bit of brain energy to think of something that's hopefully not been said, and maybe coming up with a creative solution that another person has already thought of.
Thought leader.
Thought leader. I hate that term because as I said, it is very skewed. Why would one call themselves a thought leader? And if you look at the dictionary meaning or something like that, it is something that a person is visionary. He has these thoughts and he can convey it properly to the people he's talking to. But it's difficult to call yourself a thought leader. It's too skewed. Yeah.
Trend.
Trend. Trends are used in all aspects of design, not just the fashion industry. So we look at things like WGSN, and a trend is just something that's going to influence a person's buy and purchase over the next year. So as in terms of a design trend, it could be colour palettes that are going to be popular in 2 years down the line. So you know that if you're gearing your fabrics towards that, then hopefully you're going to make sales.
UI or UX.
UI, UX. So this is very much a modern day term, all about user journeys and user experience, interface design, how the end user is going to go through, say, a website and find what they're looking for. So it's about minimizing that journey and making that as frictionless as possible, as easy as possible to them. So it often involves lots of research and understanding and skills picked up over time in order to have best practices that help understand what the user's going to want, how they're going to behave, and therefore how you design something that takes that into account, that gets them the best solution possible.
Urbanism and tactical urbanism.
Well, urbanism first is things related to the city. So just kind of in the simplest form, not stuff out in the countryside. But I would say also for urbanism and urban design, kind of, yeah, the cities, the things happening between the buildings, the urban life. And tactical urbanism is, well, again, thinking about what interventions you can do to change how that piece of urban fabric that you're working with changes. Again, you could close off a street, but through tactical urbanism, through kind of putting on events or through painting the ground or inviting certain people to come use it at certain times, you can change not only how it functionally works, but who actually uses it and how it feels, and yeah, use that to shape a conversation. Often tactical urbanism is really simple, like low-tech interventions, like paints on the ground, but you can use it, again, as a tactic to start a conversation about how this could be changed in a permanent way in the future.
Vector.
Vector. So vector is something that's created through specialist software, I suppose. But the beauty of it is it's made of curves and lines, and it's able to be scaled. So the key thing is it can be scaled without any loss of quality. So you can create something at a small size that's able to work the size of a stamp, the size of a billboard. The same file can just be used everywhere, and yeah, really excellent, really useful.
I would say that the future of design has got to be a more equitable future. I think, like if you look at the history of design, it's largely white men, white European men like me, and hopefully the future is more diverse.
Yeah. So I would say the other thing for me is that, like, in the sort of thinking about the future of design, I think you have to also reckon with that sort of past, right? And so you have to reckon with the idea that design has been complicit in the sort of promotion of single-use plastic around the world. Like design has been complicit, within the idea of even in the US and some of the ways that our cities are ordered along segregation lines, right?
I think it is something that we need to be working on an environmental basis. So in my own world, all of our work is rooted in that and has been for decades now.
The future of design, I'm going to totally go down the clothing route. So for me, fashion design, we're totally changing in terms of the way designers are thinking about sustainability. So whether it's the way that the fabric's being made, how we're importing it to the UK from China, how we could reduce our carbon footprint that way, and then also how we're creating the garment, so making to order, minimising waste, and making sure that we've got that kind of zero waste approach to the whole design process before we even start designing the garment to manufacturing it. And then how we can minimise our waste. So how do we make that sustainable? Any waste fabrics, how can we make it circular?
I think technology obviously plays a big part on how we work and live now, and I think it's not going anywhere anytime soon. So I think there does have to be more of integration with design on how to use technology to kind of create better designs or to engage with people.
So I think design is extremely digital these days, obviously, but equally maybe the past 2 years have shown that there's a real value in connections and human experience. So I wouldn't see the future as some kind of matrix world where everybody lives in the cloud and online. I would see it as this ever greater partnership between where digital enables you to experience things maybe more easily and more rapidly, and it maybe enhances things like augmented reality, for example, where you might overlay information. And I think you then add in the kind of climate aspect, climate change to that, environmentalism, people's appreciation of the natural world. So I think it's a really interesting time. I think the great thing about design is it helps us solve problems, and people are getting ever better at solving things quickly and rapidly and then adapting. So I think there'll be a lot of change, an exciting change, and hopefully really positive change.